Chapter 661. Yuan Rui didn't pay attention to the imperial physicians kneeling on the ground. He quickly got up and wanted to leave, but after taking 2 steps, he stopped. That's right, he wanted to find her, but where could he find her? He stopped an attendant and asked him what had happened recently. The attendant said with some excitement, "When you came back that day, you fell into a coma. You didn't wake up for 7 days and 7 nights. Even the imperial physicians said you... But this morning, a strange fragrance suddenly came from our palace. All the flowers in the capital bloomed and your breathing gradually stabilized. It was winter right now. Everyone said that His Highness the Crown Prince would definitely be a wise ruler. The heavens couldn't bear to see him leave this world and specially sent a vision to bring him back from the dead. Only Yuan Rui knew that there was no miracle. He thought of her appearance when her fine black hair turned to ash and his heart trembled. The Ming Kingdom's imperial court exploded. What was the reason? The Crown Prince, who had just been rumored to be a god, actually wrote a memorial in the main hall. He said that when he was about to die, he received advice from an immortal and luckily came back to life. Since then, he had been enlightened and felt that this mortal world was no longer suitable for him. He earnestly requested that his position as Crown Prince be abolished and he be allowed to wander the world. Everyone thought that His Highness the Crown Prince had gone crazy. He didn't want the position of Crown Prince that was already in his hands. Seeing that the Emperor was terminally ill, he would soon become the ruler of the world. The ones who couldn't accept this the most were Yuan Rui's confidants. They knew best how much effort their master had put in for everything. Now that everything was in front of them, they could reach out and take it. He didn't want it and he didn't want it? Yuan Rui smiled faintly. I've already found something that fascinates me more than power. Those people didn't know about Gu Xingyi's matter. They thought in their hearts, could it be that His Highness the Crown Prince really was seriously ill and his entire person had transcended? Of course, the Emperor didn't agree. Emperors were superstitious. After Yuan Rui's illness caused a vision, he firmly believed that his son wasn't ordinary and would be able to properly inherit the throne. Yuan Rui disappeared. The Crown Prince didn't go to court for several days. The reason was that he needed to properly rest. However, after several days passed, the Emperor became suspicious. He sent people to investigate and found that the Crown Prince had already disappeared. In the capital of Ming Kingdom, there was one less Crown Prince. In the sparsely populated mountain forest, there was one more solitary young master. Yuan Rui had a general understanding of the habits of flowers and plants. He had always known that although Gu Shengyin liked the liveliness of the human world, in essence, she preferred a quiet place with many of her own kind. Furthermore, Yuan Rui remembered seeing her appearance in his dream. With her appearance, she probably wouldn't go to a place where humans gathered, right? In fact, he had an even scarier guess in his heart. Could she have already? But he had never touched this part. He had always told himself that he owed her so much. She would definitely not be satisfied if she hadn't gotten it all back from him. In fact, his guess was not wrong. Gu Shengyin came to a valley near the border of the Ming Kingdom that almost no one had set foot in. Her health wasn't particularly bad. Originally, as a plant body, Yulan would definitely not be able to survive after losing her flower heart. The Elven Queen's nature magic from the previous world saved her. However, even though she had survived, her immortal body had been destroyed, and she had less than 1/10 of her magic left. Right now, she was not much different from an ordinary human woman. In fact, her body was even weaker than theirs. Chapter 662. Host, how do you feel? The system asked. Gu Shengyin smiled. Not bad. She used what little strength she had left to build a very beautiful treehouse in this small valley. Although her immortal body was no longer there, this body's instinctive closeness to animals and plants was still there. Every day, a cicadere or a few little monkeys would bring her fresh fruits or sweet nectar. For Gu Shengyin, these things were enough to satisfy this body. How are Yun Chuqing and Yuan Rui? She still hadn't forgotten about these two. One was her mission target, and the other was her lover who needed to be properly trained. Yun Chuqing married that high scholar. Because of her beauty, that high scholar was completely obedient to her. Yuan Rui gave up his position as the crown prince and has been looking for you all this time, the system replied. He actually gave up his position as the crown prince? Gu Shengyin was a little surprised. She knew how deep that person's obsession with power was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have personally given her to the emperor. Yet, when it was so easy to get, he gave it up. She really didn't know whether to call him sentimental or stupid. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have waited until now. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but sigh. The system continued, there is a saying in the human world that is very widespread, only after losing something does one know how to cherish it. Gu Shengyin didn't say anything. The system suddenly asked, Host, do you plan to meet him? Gu Shengyin replied, Of course I will meet him, but not now. Let him slowly search for me for a while. As for Yun Chuqing, she had the system keep an eye on her. Let's wait until this body recovers a little. The current her was really too weak. Even walking a few steps would make her feel extremely weak. She told those little animals not to look for her for the time being, then closed her eyes and began to cultivate. However, even she herself didn't know that this seclusion took 2 years. Gu Shengyin was woken up by the system. Such a coincidence? The system told her that the 2 people she had been paying attention to had actually come to this valley together. Relying on her family's wealth, Yun Chuqing got her husband a job outside the country. This time, the 2 of them set off together to take up the post. Unexpectedly, the roads here were complicated, and they got lost. Somehow, they ended up in this valley. As for Yuan Rui, in these 2 years, he had traveled to almost every place in the Ming Kingdom. When he came to this place and asked around, a hunter told him that this place had a very beautiful valley. There were all kinds of strange flowers and plants inside, but at the same time, there were many ferocious beasts inside. Normally, they wouldn't dare to enter. He had been to dozens of such places, if not 100. However, this time, he had an inexplicable feeling that Yulan might be here. This was not the first time he had such a feeling. Every time he went to a new place, he would have infinite hope that she would be there, but in reality, he was disappointed every time. The so-called feeling was nothing more than a way to comfort himself. He was afraid that if he didn't even have this little bit of hope, he really wouldn't have the motivation to continue walking. Yun Chuqing and the others came a little earlier. After getting lost, they had been walking for an entire morning. When the coachman saw that it seemed to be very quiet and safe, he took the initiative and drove the carriage to the valley, preparing to rest for a while and find some water to drink. Yun Chuqing and her husband also came down to take a breather. This place is quite interesting, Yun Chuqing said in amazement. She swept her eyes around and saw the treehouse that was obviously built by man. Chapter 663. She couldn't help but feel nervous. It was hard not to be suspicious of a house like this in a place where there was obviously no sign of human habitation. She told her husband about it. When the high scholar heard this, his expression changed. For scholars like him, when he was young, he had read a lot of stories about monsters and monsters in the forest. Every single one of them would appear in his mind. Why don't we leave quickly? He said to Yun Chuqing. Yun Chuqing also felt that this place was strange and nodded. However, at this moment, a few deer cries came from a corner not far away. A white figure sitting on a sika deer slowly walked toward them. That person had a head full of silver hair, but he was unbelievably young and had an astonishingly beautiful face. Coupled with his pure white clothes and the sika deer beneath him, it was hard not to think of something in such an environment. Yun Chuqing's expression changed immediately. However, her expression changed not because she thought of something bad, but because that face was too familiar. She would never forget who it was that had caused her to fall into such a predicament with just a few words. It was impossible to say that she didn't feel wronged after marrying such a useless man with no backing. Yun Chuqing couldn't sleep at night countless times, secretly hating her bad luck and fate. Similarly, the hatred in her heart towards Li Jieyu, who had caused her to become like this, could be imagined. If that woman hadn't died long ago, she probably wouldn't have been willing to leave the capital of Ming country so easily. When she suddenly saw the woman on the cicadere, she forgot to be afraid and screamed, "Li Jiu?" The white-haired woman had an indifferent expression. Her skin was so pale that it was almost transparent, and coupled with her white hair, she didn't look like a normal human at all. "Who are you people? What are you doing in my valley?" she asked coldly. As soon as she spoke, her unfamiliar tone made Yun Chuqing come back to her senses. That's right, Li Jieyu had died long ago. She took a blow for the emperor and died on the spot. Because of a big fire, not even a complete corpse was left behind. At that time, she felt incomparably happy. Yun Chuqing glanced at Gu Shengyin again. That Li Jieyu wasn't as cold as the one in front of her, so cold that she didn't seem like a real person. While Yun Chuqing was lost in thought, the man beside her spoke up. Miss, please forgive me. I was just passing by this place with my wife and wanted to see if there was a water source. Yun Chuqing turned her head and looked at the familiar emotions in the man's eyes. That was infatuation and lust. This man had shown such a look to her countless times. Sure enough, no woman with a face like that was good. As Yun Chuqing looked at Gu Shengyin, a malicious thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Outsiders are not welcome here. You can leave. Gu Shengyin was still sitting on Lu without any change in her expression. Husband, Yun Chuqing suddenly called out to her husband. The man turned his head. She gently leaned over and whispered a few words in his ear. A look of pleasant surprise flashed across the man's face. He looked at her with joy. Wife, are you serious? Yun Chuqing sneered in her heart, but her expression was one of deep affection. This concubine is sincere for you, husband. Of course I'm serious. Chapter 664. A sense of disgust welled up in Gu Shengyin's heart. This Yun Chuqing doesn't even know that I'm that Yulan from back then. I have no enmity with her, but she actually has such vicious thoughts about me just because of my appearance. She said to her husband, "Husband, I think that woman is alone in this deep mountain, so I'm afraid she doesn't have any relatives. Why don't we bring her back to the residence and you take her as your wife? I also like having a beautiful sister." That man was also a fool. He had lustful thoughts about Gu Shengyin again. After listening to his wife's words, he actually had some thoughts about it. But in reality, what was Yun Chuqing thinking? She wanted to cut open this seductive face one by one, then send her to a lowly brothel and let her be trampled on by thousands of people. It was exactly the same as in the original plot. Soon, that man put on a righteous face and said to Gu Shengyin, "Miss, there's no one in the valley, so I'm afraid it's very dangerous. I wonder if you're willing to leave this place with us?" Gu Shengyin frowned. "I'm not willing. Hurry up and leave this place." That man put on a face that said, "I'm doing this for your sake." He said, "Miss, how can you say that? We have good intentions. This deep mountain forest is very dangerous." Gu Shengyin said coldly, "Don't talk nonsense. I won't go with you." Yun Chuqing said, "Then don't blame us for being impolite." She gave a look, and the carriage drivers and guards quietly surrounded Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin sneered in her heart. She was waiting for them to make a move. On the surface, she frowned. "What are you doing?" Yun Chuqing said with a smile, "Please come with us, Mississippi." The cicadere under Gu Shengyin kicked its hooves uneasily. Obviously, the approaching humans made it very uneasy. Gu Shengyin lowered her head and patted it twice to comfort it. She looked at the person who walked in and took out a small bamboo flute from her sleeve. She put it to her mouth and blew it. Melodious music echoed throughout the valley. Yuan Rue, who was outside, also heard the sound of the flute. There was someone in the valley. He didn't know why, but this knowledge made him excited, and he hurriedly walked towards the valley. On the other side, when Yun Chuqing heard Gu Shengyin play the flute, for some reason, she suddenly panicked. She said loudly, "Hurry up and catch him. Let's leave as soon as possible." This place is a bit strange. Yes, madam. The coachman was an old servant of the Yun family. He wanted to show off his skills in front of the madam, so he ran the fastest. Just as his hand was about to touch Gu Shengyin, a heart-shaking roar rang out, causing everyone to tremble. Immediately after, the coachman felt a strong force on his back, slapping him to the side. Pfft! He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Everyone looked at the huge creature that appeared in front of Gu Shengyin in horror. How can there be a dumb insect? Yun Chuqing's husband said in panic. The dumb insect was standing beside Gu Shengyin. When the cicadere saw it, it wasn't afraid at all. This woman. She's not human, right? Yun Chuqing's husband said with a trembling voice. How could a normal person be with a dumb insect? Yun Chuqing was also a bit scared, but she still said, "Don't be afraid. We have many people, and we have weapons. It's just a dumb insect, don't be afraid." Just as she finished speaking, a gust of wind blew past. She felt pain on her face, and something warm flowed down. It was blood. Chapter 665. She screamed all of a sudden. Yun Chuqing covered her face and raised her head. She saw the culprit just now. It was a small white monkey. When it saw her looking over, it proudly stretched out its hand and waved it at her. There was even a trace of blood on its sharp nails. Clearly, it was this that had scratched her face just now. Damned beast! Yun Chuqing cursed in a shrill voice. She said to the people around her, "Go and catch that little beast. I want to skin it and pull out its tendons." However, no one moved. Yun Chuqing's clothes were carefully tugged. Her husband gestured for her to look to the side. Yun Chuqing raised her head, and the scene in front of her made her scalp tingle. She didn't know when, but the rebellious forest, the open space, and even behind them were densely packed with all kinds of animals. Not only were there ferocious beasts like bugs, but there were also poisonous creatures like snakes. Yun Chuqing even saw a few little rabbits. Only now did she realize that she was afraid. She secretly hated herself for losing her cool when she saw this face. This girl lived alone in such a place, so it was obvious that she was not an ordinary person. How could they easily provoke her? From the looks of it, this person, who knew what kind of monster she was. She forced a smile. "This is all a misunderstanding. Since you're unwilling to leave with us, we naturally won't force you." Gu Shengyin only said coldly, "Get out of here immediately." Yun Chuqing's husband immediately nodded. Okay. Let these return. We'll leave immediately." Gu Shengyin stretched out her hand and waved it. The animals behind them neatly retreated to the sides. Their eyes were still fixed on them, as if they were staring at prey in front of their mouths. They didn't dare to delay any longer and hurriedly left in the carriage. "Husband, are we going to leave just like that?" Yun Chuqing covered her face. She didn't know what was going on there. Even after using medicine, the bleeding still couldn't be stopped. Naturally, she was extremely unwilling in her heart. Her husband unyieldingly said, "What else do you want to do? Become food in the mouths of those ferocious beasts?" Yun Chuqing opened her mouth and said indignantly, "We can report this to the authorities." "Stop it!" Her husband suddenly said angrily. "Don't make trouble all day long." He was also afraid in his heart. In that situation just now, the slightest carelessness would have caused all of them to die there. It was all because of this woman who was used to causing trouble. Otherwise, why would he be so worried? "How dare you scold me? Zhang Yuan, have you forgotten who was the one who paid for this position? How dare you be so fierce to me?" Yun Chuqing was stunned for a moment before she suddenly cried out. Zhang Yuan's face darkened when he heard this. As a man, no matter how soft-hearted he was, using his wife's family's influence to buy a vacancy would tarnish his reputation. This is simply unreasonable. He felt that he really couldn't stand this woman anymore. With a cold snort, he lifted the curtain and left. There were horses outside. "Miss, if you say that about the son-in-law..." Yun Chuching's servant girl was a little uneasy. "Umph. Did I say something wrong? If it weren't for my Yun family, he would still be that worthless trash," Yun Chuching said coldly. This scene was faithfully reported to Gu Shangyin by the system. Gu Shangyin retracted her gaze. Very good. The seeds of suspicion and discord had been planted. She didn't need to take action for the following matter. Those two people could court death by themselves. Chapter 666. All she did was let the little white monkey grab a type of fruit. Yun Chuching's face would never recover. That man was the most mentally unstable. A small chaos spell could make him change into a different person without a sound. She got the animals to leave and got off the Sika deer herself. "Thank you for your hard work, little deer. Go back quickly." The little deer reluctantly rubbed itself against her body for a while before finally letting go of her. "Yulan." A voice that was trembling with excitement rang out not far away. Yuan Rui had been here for a while. Unlike Yun Chuching, he knew at first glance that Gu Shangyin was his Yulan. He watched as she sent those people away in a few moves. The current Yulan was very different from the past. Gu Shangyin frowned, her expression still cold. "Who are you?" Without waiting for Yuan Rui to speak, she continued, "Outsiders are not welcome here. Leave immediately." That unfamiliar look made Yuan Rui's heart ache. He smiled. "Yulan, I know you hate me, but please don't pretend not to know me." He would rather she hate him for the rest of her life than let her not want to have a past between the two of them. Gu Shangyin said coldly, "I'm not the Yulan you speak of. If you don't leave, you'll have to bear the consequences." Yuan Rui looked at her pale and translucent skin and long white hair. The guilt and pain in his heart could not be stopped. He would never forget who it was that had brought this to her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Gu Shangyin looked at him in confusion and did not say anything. The large insect from before walked out again and growled at Yuan Rui in a low voice, full of warning. Yuan Rui did not want to have a conflict with her, so he could only say helplessly, "Okay, okay, okay. If you let me leave, I'll leave. Don't be angry." After saying that, he really turned and left. Gu Shangyin felt that he was not someone who would give up so easily. Sure enough, the system told her that Yuan Rui had built a small bamboo house outside the valley. He planned to stay there for a long time. "Host, what do you plan to do?" the system asked. Gu Shangyin was drinking a cup of sweet nectar. She was in a good mood as she greeted the little fellow who brought her something. "What do you mean?" "We'll leave once we've completed our mission," she said calmly. Anyway, as long as Yun Chuching wasn't doing well, her mission was basically completed. As for Yulan herself, no one could say that she wasn't living a good life in such a valley as she lived like an immortal. The system immediately understood. She didn't want to bother with the person outside at all. The system was a little conflicted, but it still advised, "Looking at him, it's obvious that he's deeply in love with the host, and he knows he's wrong." Gu Shangyin looked at the system with a faint smile. "What benefits did he give you? Or, what is his identity that makes you speak so well of him?" The system immediately chose to shut up. Yuan Rui really did live outside. He would often take a stroll in the valley, and then take the initiative to leave when he crossed the line drawn by the people inside. In fact, he did it on purpose. He just wanted to see her often. He had long stopped expecting that person to forgive him. Being able to see her often and see her lively face looking at him was already the greatest fortune in his life. Chapter 667. In the blink of an eye, it was the time when spring flowers were blooming. This was the season when flowers bloomed and all plants loved it the most, but it became Gu Shingyin's most painful time. Because she had lost her heart of a flower. Even if nature magic could save her life, it would not be able to restore her heart. On this day, Yu Wenru came to the valley as usual. He quietly stood there, waiting for that person to appear and use a cold and unfamiliar tone to drive him away. He knew that his method was very shameless, but there was no other way. He could only use this method to see her. But no one came. He waited for a long time. Normally, she would have already appeared at this time. Yuanru thought in his heart. Could it be that she was already tired of him and didn't even want to see him? No, that couldn't be right. She didn't know him right now, so she shouldn't be so heartless. He suddenly had a bad premonition as he walked towards the treehouse not far away. 2 years passed. He knew that she lived here, but he had never come this close because she didn't allow it. With a light jump, he stood firmly on a thick branch. There was a green snake coiled up on the branch. When it saw this uninvited guest, it coldly spat out its tongue, warning him not to come close. Yuanru gently flicked his hand and the snake seemed to have been hit by something invisible. It was dizzy and almost fell from the tree. It could only tightly wrap its body around the branch. Yuanru didn't look at it and directly pushed it away. This house was built very delicately. It could be seen that she was living a good life here. Yuanru came to this conclusion. But in the next second, the scene in front of him made him completely overturn this conclusion. That person was curled up on the bed with her brows tightly knitted. Looking carefully, there was even cold sweat on her forehead. It was clear that she was in great pain. What was going on? Yuanru didn't have time to think about it. He quickly walked to the bed and reached out to touch her forehead. So cold. Yulan. Yulan. He softly called out. He had never hated himself so much before. He didn't even know what he could do to ease her pain. He could only quietly sit with her on the side. Pain. She was still murmuring. She didn't say anything else but this one sentence. Yuanru looked at her hand tightly covering her chest, and suddenly understood something in his heart. A huge sense of guilt drowned him. He had long known that in order to save his life, she had lost her heart. It was impossible for her to not pay the price. Looking at her hair turning white in an instant, one could tell how great the price she had to pay was. But knowing was one thing. Seeing her in such pain with his own eyes, Yuanru's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Why are you so stupid? A person like him deserved to die. It wasn't worth her doing anything. By the time Gu Shangyin regained her consciousness, several days had already passed. She immediately sensed that someone was in the room. The only human in this valley was Yuanru. Who allowed you to come in? She looked at him coldly and defensively. Yuanru laughed. Yulan, are you still going to pretend that you don't know me? Gu Shangyin was silent. She knew that Yuanru had seen her in pain. Even if he didn't see it, this man had never doubted that she was Yulan. Chapter 668. So what if I know you? So what if I don't know you? Get out of this place right now. Her tone was filled with undisguised disgust. She didn't deny it. Yulan, are you really not going to give me a chance to make it up to you? Yuanru felt a little sad. Sure. Unexpectedly, Gu Shangyin nodded. Yuanru's eyes lit up. Gu Shangyin turned to look at him. I feel uncomfortable when I see you. If you leave this place far away and never appear in front of me again, I'll forgive you. Yuanru's gaze dimmed. He knew it couldn't be that simple. Impossible, Yulan. He looked at her. My only wish now is to see you more while I'm alive. If I never see you again, I'd rather you never forgive me. Then get out. Gu Shangyin forced herself to cast a spell. Yuanru only felt his vision darken, and he inexplicably appeared outside the valley. This method was simply unfathomable. He sighed with emotion. He knew that Yulan was probably in a fit of anger right now, so he didn't plan to provoke her. Gu Shangyin was really forcing herself to hold on. She had just endured that torture and was now at her weakest, yet she still forced herself to cast a spell. As soon as Yuanru's body disappeared, she collapsed. System. The system knew what she meant and said, Yun Chuqing's face is already ruined, and her temper is getting worse. Her husband has gained a foothold in the new place and is no longer so respectful to her. Now, he even took a courtesan sent by a subordinate as his concubine. Yun Chu-ching has been arguing with him for a long time. Gu Shengyin nodded. Now that things had turned out like this, there was probably no hope for Yun Chu-ching in this lifetime. System, my mission is considered complete, right? The system knew what she meant and lit a candle for a certain man in its heart. The host can choose to leave this world. The original character will leave behind a clone and live according to the host's wishes. Alright, after I left, she didn't recognize Yuan Rue anymore. She went to a faraway place where no one could find her. She spent her days in the mountains and forests alone, without any disasters or worries. Gu Shengyin described the rest of Yu Lan's life. This was probably the life that the original Yu Lan wanted the most, right? System, extract me from this world. Gu Shengyin's heart was calm as he waited for the familiar feeling to appear in his soul. Yuan Rue obediently waited outside the valley for several days without disturbing her. He wanted to wait for her to cool down a little before going to see her. He even thought that if he continued to stay by her side like this, would he be able to obtain her true forgiveness at the end of his life? However, he never thought that when he entered the valley again, it would really become an empty valley. The treehouse was still there, but the person inside was no longer there. He stood in the empty treehouse and finally understood a fact: that person really hated him to the core, and her heart was cold towards him. There was not a trace of falsehood in her words. I don't want to see you. You should never appear in front of me again. He raised his hand to cover his face. The sunlight was a little dazzling, and a transparent liquid slid down his face. Chapter 669. Host, do you want to choose a random skill from any world? Yes. Gu Shengyin was speechless as she looked at the random ability that the system gave her. It was actually Yu Lan's mind-reading ability. She looked at the world she was in and said decisively, "Can I choose not to?" The system flashed white. Yes. Gu Shengyin chose not to. What a joke. She had mind-reading ability in the previous world, but she could control it. It was up to her whether she wanted to listen or not. In this world, an ordinary human girl with such a skill would definitely be annoyed to death. Just think about it. Gu Shengyin met all kinds of people every day, and all kinds of strange psychological activities sounded in her mind. This was simply unbearable. Let's transfer the plot. Gu Shengyin accepted the plot while sizing up her surroundings. She was in a very clean small room. There was a desk against the wall with a small lamp on it. All kinds of books and learning materials were piled up. The owner of the room was obviously still a student. The room was very cozy and looked very comfortable. At a glance, she didn't see any valuable items. Obviously, the situation in this house could only be considered average. Coincidentally, the memory transfer was completed. The original owner, An Qinyu, was a high school student. Her parents were ordinary workers, and she had an elder sister who was 2 years older than her. She didn't live very happily in this family. Her parents obviously favored their elder daughter. They seemed to only have some obligations to their younger daughter this year. Send her to school, provide for her food and clothes, and don't think too much about the rest. When An Qinyu was young, she felt very wronged and upset. But as she gradually grew up, she gradually saw through it. She didn't hate them because they brought her into this world and raised her for so many years. This was a huge favor. They didn't owe her anything. Instead, she owed them a lot. She even thought that in the future, she would definitely choose a university far away from home and work to earn her living expenses. She would be far away from them and wouldn't be an eyesore. In the future, she would give them money for their retirement every month to repay their kindness. As for kinship, sorry, after more than 10 years of coldness and neglect, she didn't believe in this anymore. She had planned everything well, but she didn't expect that one thing would completely change her life. That day, when she came home from school, she saw 2 people sitting in her house who were dressed in clothes that clearly did not belong to this place. Her parents, on the other hand, were standing by her side in a reserved manner. The noblewoman was very excited when she saw her. She pulled her aside and said a lot of words. She probably meant that she was their daughter and that the doctor had mistakenly taken her away from the hospital more than 10 years ago. Looking at the evasive look of her parents, she sneered in her heart. Did the hospital really make a mistake? Just like what was mentioned in the idol drama, she had a very handsome biological brother and a pair of powerful and influential parents. She should have been a real proud daughter of heaven. This incident was exposed because the girl who was supposed to replace her got into a car accident. During the blood transfusion, the doctor reported her blood type, which made the couple realize that something was wrong. In the end, they investigated the hospital where the baby was delivered back then, and only then did they discover the mistake back then. That girl was called Song Tian, a very proud little princess. Compared to Enchinyu, who had suddenly arrived, she seemed more like a member of this family. Chapter 670. Song Tian was supposed to be sent back to the Yin family, but the Song family's parents took pity on her leg, so they allowed her to continue living in the Song family. She could let the Yin family's parents visit her and only return home after her injury had healed. Mr. and Mrs. Song had good intentions. They thought about how much they loved Enchinyu and felt guilty about it. They thought that Mr. and Mrs. and missed Song Tian very much. However, in Song Tian's eyes, the couple who had raised her from a young age had finally found their biological daughter. As an adopted daughter, she was just an extra. She didn't want to go back to the Song family at all. Mr. and Mrs. Song's monthly salary wasn't even enough for her to buy a pair of shoes. She couldn't accept that she wasn't the daughter of a rich family, but the daughter of an ordinary family. She didn't even want to see Mr. and Mrs. N. She had been the daughter of the Song family since she was a child. Why did everything change after a car accident? If only everything could go back to how it used to be. If only Enchinyu didn't exist. She lost her mind because of this. This thought became clear in her mind and she made a final decision. She found someone to arrange a car accident. That boy had always liked her. He liked her so much that he was willing to sacrifice his own life. He drove his own car and ran a red light, knocking Enchinyu who was crossing the road. Now that Enchinyu was dead, the boy had to bear all the responsibility. However, he was just a high school student. How could he withstand a professional interrogation? Mr. and Mrs. Song didn't expect that their biological daughter would be faced with such a tragedy. Mrs. Song fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she didn't want to see Song Tian again. Song Tian paid the price for what she had done, but Enchinyu would never come back. Gu Shengyin came back to her senses and checked the time. It was time for school. She cleaned up and found that the living room was empty. In the Yin family, she would never have breakfast prepared for her. It was a little cold outside. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but wrap her jacket tighter around herself. She went to the best high school in the city and the tuition was extremely expensive. Enchinyu was able to attend this school because she was the top student in her class. She had scored full marks in almost every subject in the middle school entrance exam. The school had waived all her tuition fees and even gave her a large scholarship. Since they didn't need to spend their own money, father and mother didn't say much. If Gu Shengyin remembered correctly, Song Tian actually went to this school as well, but the two of them had never interacted before. The Song family's upbringing was very strict. Papa Song and Mama Song weren't like other families that let their children go to those private aristocratic schools. But even so, what Song Tian was wearing was definitely not a brand that an ordinary high school student could afford. She bought a cup of soy milk and 2 buns and ate them as she walked. Tian, what are you looking at? Song Tian came back to her senses. Seeing that her friend was calling her, she smiled and said, "Nothing. I just thought that the girl looked familiar." Her friend glanced at Gu Shengyin's back and said with a smile, "Oh, she's Enchinyu. She's the top student in our school. She's the winner of the first-class scholarship every year." Song Tian glanced at the girl and felt that she looked a lot like her mother from the side. But her mother didn't have any relatives with the surname and judging from her shabby appearance, she couldn't be her mother's relative. Song Tian didn't think much of it and walked towards the classroom. Chapter 671. And Chinyu grew up in a poor family, so she had a cold personality. However, there were rarely any grudges between the students. At most, her classmates just thought that the girl with the best grades and the prettiest girl in the class was a little aloof. She had a few friends in the class who she could talk to, but none of them were close friends. There were 2 tables of girls gossiping in front of her. "Did you see Song Tion from the 5th class today? I saw the watch on her wrist in a magazine 2 days ago. What's so strange about that? Which item on that young lady's body isn't branded?" One of the girls said enviously, "Her family is so rich. I see her being chauffeured to school every day." Gu Shengyin shook her head and smiled. It was no wonder. How could a spoiled little princess like her endure the life of an ordinary person? After a day of studying, Gu Shengyin went home. As soon as she opened the door with her key, she heard the noise in the living room and the aroma of stewed soup coming from the kitchen. Gu Shengyin knew that the eldest daughter of the family, An Qinqi, was back. As soon as she entered the house, there was a strange silence in the room. Then, An Qinqi, who was sitting on the sofa, spoke first. You're back? Are you hungry? Mom made some soup. It smells so good." An Qinqi was the only person in the family who would call An Qinyu Yu. She was also the only one who cared about her younger sister. Gu Shengyin had a good impression of her. Gu Shengyin smiled at her older sister. Then, she ignored the couple who pretended not to see her and went back to her room without looking back. After she entered the room, Mrs. N turned around and scolded, "Look at her. What's with her attitude? Did I give birth to her to collect a debt?" And Qinqi had been spoiled since she was a child, so she was bold with her words. She said to her mother, "Mom, don't scold Yu. You two are too biased. If you didn't go overboard, she wouldn't be like this now." She was also puzzled. "You like me so much, and you don't favor boys over girls. Why can't you treat Yu better? Could it be that she was adopted?" Mother N's face changed and she pretended to be angry. "You child, what nonsense are you talking about? All right. I'll go check if the soup is ready." At the dining table, Gu Shengyin consciously sat at the furthest corner. "Come on, Chi-Chi, have some soup." Mrs. N scooped a bowl of soup and handed it to An Qinqi. "You must be having a hard time at school. It's not easy for you to come back, so you must nourish yourself well." An Qinqi was studying in a university in the city next door and she would only come back once every few months. Sometimes, she would even come back for a semester. An Qinqi winked at her mother, who understood her daughter's intention. Although she was reluctant, she didn't want to disappoint her eldest daughter. She took out a bowl and scooped some soup for Gu Shengyin. "And Qinyu, have some soup." Gu Shengyin glanced at it and took it in silence. She politely thanked her mother. In the evening, Gu Shengyin went back to her room after dinner. Not long after, An Qinqi pushed the door open and walked in. "Sister." Gu Shengyin put down the pen in her hand and called out to her with a smile. An Qinqi was slightly shaken. She joked, Yu, if you go to university in the future, there will be a lot of boys chasing after you." Her younger sister didn't look like her parents. Everyone in the family had ordinary looks, and An Qinqi was considered pretty and cute. However, An Qinyu had fair skin and exquisite features. She didn't look like she was born with the genes of the An family. Chapter 672. An Qinqi had also secretly thought about the plots of novels and dramas when she was a child. However, when she grew up, she realized that she was overthinking things. How could such coincidences happen in real life? Her younger sister might have inherited the best genes of the An family. Gu Shengyin smiled and didn't say anything. An Qinqi took out a small box. "I brought you a present." Gu Shengyin took it. It was a bottle of eye drops. The words on it were written in German. "I heard from my classmate that this is very good for preventing myopia. You're studying hard in high school now. Don't overwork your eyes," An Qinqi said. Gu Shengyin felt a surge of warmth in her heart. In the 16 years of Nchinyu's life, she was the only one who treated her sincerely. All right. And Nchinchi looked a little conflicted. Don't worry too much about our parents. She couldn't say that her parents treated her the same way. She couldn't even say that her parents loved her. Father An and Mother An's hearts were so biased that they couldn't be any more biased. Gu Shengyin smiled faintly. Don't worry, sis. I'm fine. When I go to university in the future, I'll fill in a place further away and come back once a semester. And Nchinchi looked a little sad. You, don't be like this. Gu Shengyin took her hand. Sis, we both know that Dad and Mom don't like me. If I go far away, I'll be happy to relax for them. And Nchinchi didn't say anything in the end. She just sighed and told Gu Shengyin not to think too much. Then, she left. And Nchinchi only stayed at home for 4 days before she went back to school. Gu Shengyin personally went to the airport to see her off. On the way back, Gu Shengyin sensed something and turned around to take a look. Not far away, a young man in a black trench coat was standing there and looking at her. His eyebrows and eyes were very good-looking, and he was extremely handsome. It was rare to see such a good-looking person on the big screen. Gu Shengyin even saw a few young girls secretly taking out their phones to take pictures of him. She knew who he was. Song Yi was supposed to be this body's biological brother. But now, they were just strangers. Gu Shengyin only took a glance before she turned her head back and walked towards the exit. However, her heart was far from being as calm as it appeared on the surface. System, what's going on? How could he be my biological brother? What kind of development was this? The system remained silent for a long time, which was rare. Finally, it replied, I don't know. Gu Shengyin. Could it be that he wanted her to be a considerate little sister to make up for the harm she had done to him in the previous world? Gu Shengyin said that she couldn't do it at all. Song Yi would never be able to marry and have children normally. Gu Shengyin could not tolerate her lover being with another woman, even if he had no memories of her. However, it was also impossible for her to be with him. After experiencing so many human worlds, Gu Shengyin, who already had basic human morals and ethics, could not accept such a thing. Her heart was in a mess, but she still walked forward calmly on the surface. Song Yi looked at the girl's back until she completely walked away and disappeared. She looked like his mother. This was the first impression he had when he first saw her. It wasn't that their facial features were too similar. It was just that when she lowered her head subconsciously or smiled, they looked 30% alike. Song Yi frowned and pondered for a while. In the end, he didn't come up with any conclusions, so he turned around and left. Chapter 673. Gu Shengyin went to look for Mr. and Mrs. N after she got home. You're moving out? Mrs. N was a little surprised. Yes. Gu Shengyin said softly, I plan to rent a single room next to the school. That way, I won't have to waste too much time going to and from school. I can also save some time to study. Of course, she couldn't say that they hated each other, but she had to find a reasonable excuse. She looked at Mrs. Ann's expression and added, My scholarship is enough to rent a room. As expected, Mrs. Ann agreed without much hesitation when she heard that she didn't need to pay for it. At night, in the bedroom of the An family, Mr. Ann's voice was a little hesitant. Yu Feng, aren't we a little too harsh on Chinyu? After all, we've raised her for so many years. This relationship isn't any worse than our biological relationship. Mrs. Ann's voice was cold. She's not my Chinyu. You've said it yourself. We've raised her for more than 10 years. We've fed and clothed her. We've done everything that should be done for her. Mr. An sighed and didn't refute his wife. He had always felt guilty towards Chinyu. She was supposed to be the daughter of a rich family and was brought to their house. He and his wife had never given her the love and care of her family. He wanted to make it up to her, but every time he brought it up, Yu Feng would get angry. Over time, he didn't bring it up anymore. The next day happened to be the monthly break. Gu Shengyin didn't hesitate to carry her luggage and move out. After school, she carried her school bag and saw Song Yi at the school gate again. This time, he drove. Gu Shengyin watched Song Tian happily get into the car. Obviously, he was here to pick up his sister. Two girls beside her said enviously, Tian said that he's her brother. He's so handsome. Her biological brother is picking her up from school. I'm so envious. When Song Yi closed the car door, he saw Gu Shengyin standing at the school gate. For some reason, he felt that the girl gave him a different feeling from the others. He asked casually, "Is that girl also from your school?" Song Tian curiously followed his gaze and saw that it was Gu Shengyin. She nodded and said, "She's in Qinyu, the top student in our grade." As soon as she finished speaking, she realized that something was amiss. Why was her brother suddenly interested in her? Oh. Song Tian dragged out her words and looked at Song Yi. "Brother, you can't have taken a fancy to her because she's pretty, right?" Hearing this, Song Yi chuckled. "Don't talk nonsense. Your classmate is still so young." Song Tian stuck out her tongue and did not say anything else. Although the two of them were biological siblings, Song Yi had been studying abroad all year round, so the two of them didn't spend much time together. She wanted to get close to him, but she always felt that this elder brother had a sense of distance when facing everyone, including herself. The two of them weren't as close as others thought. However, she still muttered softly, "I heard that her family is very ordinary. That's because Nchinyu's parents don't like her. Her parents haven't even attended a single parent meeting." This was all the gossip that the people around her had told her. When Song Yi heard this, he thought of that girl's faint smile and frowned slightly. Would there be parents who didn't like their own daughter? Moreover, she was such an outstanding and beautiful daughter. Chapter 674. Time passed in the blink of an eye. It was almost time for Song Tian to get into a car accident. As expected, not long after Gu Shengyin arrived at school, she heard her classmates discussing this matter. "I heard it's a girl from the 5th class. It's that Song Tian who's said to be from a rich family." Gu Shengyin opened the book and read slowly, pretending that the gossip did not exist. Her classmates also spontaneously stopped gossiping around her. Speaking of which, it was strange. This top student in the class looked thin and small, but as long as she sat there without putting on any expression, she would naturally give off a feeling that strangers should not get close to her. Some people even joked in private that this was the aura of a top student. Ordinary people like them wouldn't understand it. Gu Shengyin raised her head slightly, and her mind went blank for a second. Song Tian was in a car accident, so the Song family should be coming soon. It was the power of money. It had been less than a month since the news of Song Tian's car accident spread. On this day, when Gu Shengyin returned home, she saw a middle-aged man and woman in front of her rented apartment. Although they were middle-aged, the couple looked very young. Judging from their faces, they looked to be in their 30s. Seeing Gu Shengyin, the woman's eyes immediately turned red. Are you Nchinyue?" Gu Shengyin looked at them warily and didn't open the door. "Who are you?" The man calmed down and said gently, "We're your parents, friends. We're here to see you." Gu Shengyin became even more vigilant. "Liar. My parents don't have any friends who know about me." She was right. Ever since she was a child, the N couple only brought their eldest daughter with them when they went out to socialize. Some of their friends didn't even know that they had two daughters. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, the couple's expressions were a little pained. When they investigated what happened back then, of course, they also investigated the N family. They found out clearly how the N couple had treated their youngest daughter all these years. Their daughter, who should have been the apple of their eye, had actually been ignored by another family for 16 years as if she was invisible. The woman finally burst into tears. I'm your mother. I'm your biological mother." The man felt that this girl was too calm. He was afraid that she wouldn't believe them so easily. Sure enough, Gu Shengyin just looked at the two of them strangely, and then quickly took out her mobile phone. She bought it with her scholarship, and the N family didn't care about this kind of thing at all. "I don't know who you are. You suddenly appeared at my door and said such inexplicable words. Hurry up and leave, or I will call the police. Gu Shengyin said. However, the man saw that her hand that was holding the phone was trembling slightly. Obviously, this girl was not as calm as she looked on the surface. She was very scared. After all, he was only a 16-year-old child. No matter how precocious he was, how mature could he be? The man's heart softened, but at the same time, he hated the couple. Letting a teenage girl live alone outside, aren't they afraid that she will be in danger? What kind of parents are they? She is so precocious because no one has ever planned for her, right? Chapter 675. He said softly, "Don't be nervous. We're really not bad people." Gu Shengyin choked. No bad person would write that word on their face. Papa Song was speechless. He felt that this girl was unexpectedly cute. He smiled and said, "I'll call your parents now and see if it's convenient for them to come over." He really dialed Papa An's number in front of Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin's familiar voice came from the other end of the line. Papa Song chatted with him briefly before the two hung up. Gu Shengyin heard it clearly. Papa An said that he would rush over with his wife soon. Papa Song looked at Gu Shengyin. "Now you believe that we're not bad people, right?" Gu Shengyin was silent for a moment. She apologized to the two of them, then took out the key to open the door and let them in. Gu Shengyin was just a student after all. She rented a very ordinary single room. After putting a bed and a desk in the room, there was no extra space at all. Now that there were two adults, it was very crowded. However, although the room was small, Gu Shengyin kept it very clean. Even the not-so-white walls were pasted with warm stickers. When Mama Song entered the room and saw this scene, the tears that she held back with difficulty fell again. What kind of life had her daughter been living all these years? Gu Shengyin took out two stackable plastic stools from under the bed and put them next to the two of them. She was a little embarrassed. "I only have this kind of stools here." Papa Song and Mama Song hurriedly said that they didn't mind. She went to get a pot of water and used disposable plastic cups to pour water for the two of them. Mama Song held the plain water and looked at Gu Shengyin in a daze. She didn't know what she was thinking. Papa Song was calm. He could see that Gu Shengyin was a little restrained and nervous. He just kept asking her some small questions with a smile, such as whether she was used to living alone, if she had any problems with her studies, and so on. Gu Shengyin answered slowly, and he relaxed a little. Papa Song and Mama Song looked at her. Although this child didn't like to talk much, she was very polite and well-behaved in front of the elders. Someone knocked on the door again. According to the phone call just now, it should be the couple who came this time. Gu Shengyin went to open the door. As expected, it was Papa Song and Mama Song. Mama Song and Mama Song began to ask Gu Shengyin when she saw Papa Song. "Come, did they ask you any strange questions? You didn't talk nonsense, did you?" "Ahem." Father An coughed heavily, and Mother An closed her mouth. Mr. and Mrs. Song, who were standing in the room, didn't look too good. Mama's a mother and T's a mother's daughter. One could only imagine what kind of life Chin you had been living all these years. It was obviously very crowded in the small room with 4 adults. Papa Song suggested that they go out and talk. He deliberately turned around and said to Gu Shengyin, You, Papa. Uncle wants to talk to you. Can you come with us?" Gu Shengyin nodded, and the few of them went to the nearest tea house and asked for a private room. After sitting down, Papa Song noticed that Gu Shengyin had chosen a seat far away from Papa Song and Mama Song. She was as cold as she was when they first met. It was obvious that she didn't have a good relationship with Papa Song and Mama Song. Chapter 676. Mr. Song began to briefly explain what he had found out. After he finished, Mrs. N was the first to react. "That's impossible. Chin Yu is my daughter. How could there be a mistake?" If Mr. Song hadn't investigated her attitude towards Chinyu over the years and witnessed how she treated his daughter with his own eyes, he might have believed her words. I've already checked the information of the two families. My wife gave birth in the same hospital as you, so we can't rule out the possibility that there's a mistake, Mr. Song said patiently. Before they came to Gu Shengyin's place, they had actually gone to see Mr. and Mrs. N, but they had immediately turned hostile and chased them out when they heard that it was about the child. Mrs. N only said coldly, "That's impossible." Her repeated refusal to cooperate was infuriating. Mrs. Song flew into a rage on the spot. "It's not up to you to decide whether or not it's possible. You can tell who Chinyu resembles at a glance. Do you dare to let Chinyu do a paternity test with us?" Mrs. N retorted, "Who knows who you are? Do you think Chinyu will agree to do a DNA test just because you want it? I'm telling you, I won't agree to it." Mr. and Mrs. Song had obviously never seen such an unreasonable person. Mrs. Song was so angry that her body trembled. Mr. Song's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Shouldn't a normal person's first reaction be to find out the truth after hearing what he said? After all, if there really was a mistake, it would mean that their biological daughter had been separated from them for so many years. How could they not be curious and anxious at all? How could they be so sure that it was impossible? Moreover, it would be fine if Mr. and Mrs. N cherished their daughter like a treasure, but they clearly didn't like Chinyu at all. Why were they obstructing her? Could it be that there was something fishy about this matter? If that was the case, the DNA test had to be done. He ignored Mrs. N and turned to Gu Shengyin. "Chinyu, you heard my conversation with Mr. N just now. I really want to find my biological daughter. I'm afraid that she's not living a good life out there. Are you willing to do the DNA test with me?" Gu Shengyin was a little hesitant. Any 16-year-old girl who encountered such a situation would probably be in a mess. Before Chinyu could say anything, Mrs. N scolded her. "And Chinyu, your father and I have been providing you with food and clothes all these years. Have we ever mistreated you? Now, you're actually listening to the nonsense of two people who came out of nowhere and want to do a paternity test? Are you trying to anger your father and me to death? Why are you so fierce?" Mrs. Song stood up and stood in front of Gu Shengyin. "She's only a 16-year-old child. Is this how you treat your daughter?" Mother unrolled her eyes. "I'm disciplining my own daughter. It's none of your business." "You." Mama Song still wanted to say something, but Gu Shengyin interrupted her. "I'm willing." Gu Shengyin's voice was not very loud, but it was very firm. "I'm willing to do a paternity test with you," she said word by word. Mrs. N was stunned for a moment before she exploded. "And Chinyu, you ingrate. I've raised you for so many years for nothing. Mom." Gu Shengyin stood quietly at the side with a calm expression. "Tell me honestly, after all these years, have you really treated me as your daughter?" Chapter 677. Her words were clear and light, but there seemed to be an indescribable magic, which made Mother N unconsciously shut her mouth. "Ah, Mother N, when I was a child, you bought the latest toys for my sister, bought beautiful dolls, and took her to the amusement park to play. But what about me? You didn't even care if it fit me or not. You just bought 5 or 6 sets of new clothes, and that was all the new clothes I had for that year. Not to mention taking me out to play. I always remember that when I was in the 5th grade of primary school, an aunt from your company came to our house to play. When she saw me, she said, 'Is this your child?' I always thought that Chinchi was the only child in your family. When I was a child, I secretly cried and wondered if you didn't like me because I wasn't as good as my sister. But later, I understood that no matter how good I was, you still wouldn't like me. I've always wanted to ask why. If you really didn't like me, why did you give birth to me in the first place? I've also thought about it. Is it possible that I was really picked up or adopted? Is that why you don't like me so much? No matter what the truth is, I'm willing to accompany these 2 uncles and aunties to do a DNA test today. It's not that I really don't think I'm your daughter, but I feel that they really care about the biological daughter that they missed out on. I wish that they can find her soon. I don't want there to be another child like me in this world who suffers such unfair treatment. As for you, anyway, you don't like me so much. I'll do one more thing to make you unhappy. It'll just make you hate me more." She finished this sentence without changing her expression and showed a faint smile to Mrs. Song, who had already burst into tears. "Auntie, let's go." Mrs. Song finally couldn't help but hold her in her arms. "Chinyu, you're a good child. They don't know how to cherish you." Gu Xingyi's eyes were also a little wet. She said that she didn't care and didn't take it to heart, but it was just because no one had ever cared about her. Tears were the most precious in front of people who cared about her. Gu Xingyi forced herself to hold back the tears in her eyes. She smiled and said, "I know. I've always been outstanding. They didn't treat me well. It's their loss to lose such an outstanding daughter." Mrs. Song also wiped her tears and took Gu Xingyi's hand out of the door. "Whether you are my daughter or not, from today on, I will treat you as my daughter." The three of them stood up and walked out of the door, completely ignoring the family's parents who were sitting on the side in a daze. "The test results are out." The doctor in the white coat handed a document to Father Song. Even though they already knew the answer in their hearts, when they saw the number, Father and Mother Song were so excited that their eyes turned red again. Mrs. Song looked at Gu Xingyi, who was standing at the side in a daze. With tears in her eyes, she smiled and said, You, my child, are you willing to call me Mommy?" Gu Xingyi was still in a daze. She did not expect that her childhood suspicions were all true. They didn't like her not because she was bad, and it wasn't because she had an older sister. It was because she wasn't their daughter at all. A huge sour feeling overwhelmed her heart. She finally couldn't help but cry out loud. Chapter 678. When the Song family placed the information in front of the An's parents, they finally shut their mouths. Mrs. N was still unwilling to give up. She stared at Gu Xingyi and said, Your father and I have never mistreated you all these years, have we? Now that you've found your biological parents, don't you want your father and I who have raised you for so many years? You'd better shut up." Mrs. Song finally couldn't stand it anymore. She was well educated, but in front of such a shameless woman, she couldn't hold it in. "What do you mean by we haven't mistreated you? Do you mean we haven't mistreated you when we gave you a meal? I'll give you a sum of money as compensation for taking care of Chinyu all these years. As for the rest, I don't want to say more." She would treat her daughter well in the palm of her hand. People like them wouldn't have the right to trample on her. Ever since Gu Xingyi found out about that matter, he had become much quieter. Mr. and Mrs. Song also understood her and didn't force her to call them parents. It was already a pleasant surprise for them that she agreed to go back to the Song family with them. It was Gu Xingyi's first time to visit the Song family's house. "You, this will be your home from now on. I've already tidied up a room for you. Your father and I bought everything personally. Let me take you to have a look now." Mrs. Song held Gu Xingyi's hand and walked upstairs as if she was showing off a treasure. Opening the door, Gu Xingyi saw a beautiful room. This was the room that all teenage girls yearned for. There was a big princess bed, piled up with plush toys that were bigger than a person. There were all kinds of exquisite and beautiful jewelry on the dressing table, and the wardrobe was full of the new products of the season from major brands. "Do you like it?" Mrs. Song looked at her expectantly. How could she not like it? Gu Xingyi's eyes suddenly turned red. She whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Mrs. Song almost suspected that she was hallucinating. She asked in a trembling voice, What did you call me just now? Can you call me again?" Gu Xingyi called her Mom with tears in her eyes. Then Mrs. Song hugged her with the same red eyes. "Good, my good daughter." Gu Xingyi hugged her waist tightly and whispered, "No one has ever been so nice to me." Her voice was very soft. She thought that Mrs. Song wouldn't be able to hear her, but in fact, she did. Mrs. Song sniffled and held back the tears that were about to fall. After a long time, she let go of Gu Xingyi. "Look at me. I was so focused on bringing you up that I forgot that it's almost time to eat. You must be hungry, right? I've already instructed Sister Lin to prepare the meal. When she went downstairs with Gu Shangyin, the Song family was already sitting at the dining table. Other than Father Song, there was also Song Yi, as well as Song Tian, who was recuperating at home. When Song Yi saw Gu Shangyin, he was surprised. So it's her? His parents had already told him about his younger sister. He knew that Song Tian wasn't his younger sister. It seemed that the girl in front of him, who looked a little like his mother, was his real younger sister. Song Tian's feelings were very complicated. Not long after she was discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Song and her husband discussed for half the night. In the end, they chose to confess to her. She wasn't their daughter. When she was born, the hospital gave her to the wrong person. But after all, the Song family had raised her for so many years. They still had feelings for her. Mrs. Song said that she would always treat Song Tian as her daughter. But Song Tian didn't expect that the person she replaced was Yu. Chapter 679. Mrs. Song pulled Gu Shangyin to sit beside her. During dinner, Mrs. Song personally scooped rice for her and asked her what dishes she liked to eat. Song Tian watched as her parents circled around Gu Shangyin. She couldn't vent her anger no matter how hard she tried. She suddenly screamed, attracting the attention of Mrs. Song, who was scooping soup for Gu Shangyin. Mrs. Song looked at Song Tian in surprise. Tian, what's wrong? Tears welled up in Song Tian's eyes. She said pitifully, "My leg suddenly hurt." This wasn't a small matter. Mr. Song quickly called the family doctor in charge of Song Tian and asked him to come over and take a look. Mrs. Song also comforted her. Once again, Song Tian experienced the feeling of being surrounded by everyone. She secretly and proudly glanced at her. Her eyes were full of power. "Look, so what if you're our biological daughter? I'm the one who's loved the most." Gu Shangyin was stunned for a moment. Then, she lowered her head and ate her meal as usual. Suddenly, a drumstick was placed in her bowl. Gu Shangyin looked up. It was Song Yi. "Don't always eat vegetables. It's not nutritious." Song Yi had a faint smile on his face. He saw all of Song Tian's little tricks. He didn't like it, but he didn't want to expose her in front of his parents. Gu Shangyin smiled at him. Song Tian's mood, which had just improved, became gloomy again. Song Yi's brother had been studying overseas. They didn't spend much time together, and their relationship was only faint. Song Yi treated her more like an older brother's responsibility to his younger sister. He didn't even put food in her bowl. Unlike Song Tian's gloominess, Mr. and Mrs. Song were more relieved to see this. Their eldest son rarely got close to others. Even with Song Tian, he was always indifferent. They were worried that he wouldn't get along well with Yu. Now, it seemed like they worried too much. Putting aside this interlude, the meal was quite harmonious. Gu Shangyin adapted very quickly to this new family. Gu Shangyin's father and mother always felt that they had mistreated this daughter. They always wanted to give her all the good things. Gu Shangyin seemed to be a little unaccustomed to this kind of enthusiasm, but every time, she would accept it with a smile. This made her parents feel gratified and touched. It was a rest day. As soon as Gu Shangyin came downstairs, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. The hall was filled with all kinds of colored lights and decorations. The most eye-catching thing was a huge birthday cake on the big table in the middle. Everyone in the Song family stood there and looked at her. Mama Song smiled at her and said, Yu, happy birthday." Gu Shangyin's expression changed from confusion to joy. In Yinu's memory, there was nothing about birthdays. That couple in the family was willing to swap their 2 newborn children for the Song family's wealth. This was enough to show how selfish they were. How could they spend so much effort on Yinu, who wasn't related to them by blood? Looking at Yinu's blank expression, Song Tian felt a little disdainful. So what if Yinu was the top student in the grade? She still looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. What a disgrace. Gu Xingyi's face suddenly broke into a smile. It wasn't the usual faint smile, but a happy smile from the bottom of her heart. She walked briskly downstairs and hugged Mr. and Mrs. Song. "Mom, Dad, thank you. I'm very happy." Chapter 680. Then, she walked to Song Yi's side. "Brother, can I give you a hug?" she asked. Mr. and Mrs. Song were a little nervous. Although their eldest son looked gentle, he didn't like to be close to others. He didn't even hug Song Tian when he was young. What if he rejected Yu and made her feel bad? However, they worried too much. Song Yi didn't know why, but when he saw the girl looking at him with her dark eyes, he felt that he couldn't reject her. He opened his arms to her. Gu Shengyin jumped into his arms happily. Smelling the light lotus fragrance, Gu Shengyin was very satisfied. Even though they couldn't be lovers, it felt good to be a younger sister who was doted on by her brother. Song Tian sat in the wheelchair and watched her brother and Enchinyu hug each other. She clenched the wheelchair so hard that her fingernails left marks on it. She would never forget how she acted like a spoiled child and asked her brother to hug her when she was young. However, she had always been like a fish in water in front of her parents, but her brother rejected her time and time again. Back then, she could sense that although her brother didn't dislike her, they weren't very close either. She thought it was because of his personality. After all, her brother was so gentle and polite even to her parents. But why? Why would he put food in Enchinyu's bowl and hug her? Was it because she was his biological sister? She had been his sister for more than 10 years. In his eyes, she couldn't compare to a so-called biological sister, whom he had only known for a few days. Tian Tian. Song Tian was brought back to reality by Gu Xingyin's voice. So she was the only one left. She wanted to hug her. Song Tian looked at her coldly. She didn't like Enchinyu from the bottom of her heart. If it weren't for Enchinyu, she wouldn't have had such an accident in her life. Enchinyu must hate her too. Song Tian took away her status as the heiress of the family, but she still pretended to be so friendly. It was disgusting. "I don't want to give you a fake hug. Enchinyu, I don't like you." Song Tian had been spoiled by the Song family since she was young. She never cared about other people's feelings when she spoke. Anyway, her parents would always listen to her. But this time, she miscalculated. "Song Tian, what are you talking about?" Papa Song's complexion turned somewhat ugly. He looked at Yu and then at Song Tian. He really felt that he had spoiled Song Tian all these years. "Where's your upbringing? Is that what I taught you since you were young?" Mama Song also had a look of disapproval on her face. Gu Shengyin stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Song Tian felt wronged after being scolded by Papa Song. She yelled, "It's true. I don't like Enchinyu. Our family was originally fine, but everything changed when she came. Dad, Mom, you don't like me anymore. Is it because I'm not your daughter?" This time, Papa Song was also speechless. This kind of thing was a huge blow to the two children. Tian Tian had been spoiled by them since she was young. She probably couldn't accept that she wasn't the daughter of the Song family. Song Yi immediately looked at Gu Shengyin, who was standing there. After hearing Song Tian's words, the girl was probably the most embarrassed and at a loss. She was supposed to be the little princess of this family, but in Song Tian's words, she became an outsider who ruined her happy life. Chapter 681. She stood there awkwardly, seemingly uneasy because of Song Tian's words. But at that moment, Mr. and Mrs. Song were thinking about how to comfort Tian Tian. No one would have thought that compared to Song Tian, who had always been pampered in this family, the cautious Enchinyu was the one who needed the most protection. Song Yi felt that this girl was the most innocent and pitiful. He didn't know what possessed him, but he couldn't bear to see her sad. Whenever he saw her unhappy, he would feel as if his heart was being pricked by thin needles, and the pain would be long and painful. Gu Shengyin was standing there when she suddenly felt a warmth approaching her. Then, her hand was held. "Dad, Mom, I don't think we can continue with this birthday party. I'll take Yu out to play," Song Yi said to Mr. and Mrs. Song. Mr. and Mrs. Song looked at their eldest son in surprise. They only realized how hurtful Song Tion's words were when they saw Gu Shengyin's reddened eyes. Go. Have fun." Mrs. Song also felt that it wasn't appropriate for Yu and Tian to be together, so she hurriedly said to her eldest son. Mr. Song wanted to say something, but he looked at Gu Shengyin and sighed in the end. Song Yi held Gu Shengyin's hand all the way until they arrived at the garage. Song Yi then let go of her hand and they got into the car. Song Yi turned sideways and fastened her seatbelt for her. "Thank you, big brother," said Gu Shengyin. Song Yi only felt that hearing the word brother from her mouth made him feel very satisfied. He pretended to be unhappy. "If you say that again, I won't be happy. Since you're already calling me big brother, it's only right for a big brother to pamper his little sister. Don't let me hear the word thank you from your mouth again." He looked at the girl in front of him, who had been nervous because of the first half of his sentence, and he couldn't help but smile. "Did your family call you Yu in the past?" asked Song Yi. Gu Shengyin shook her head. "No, they just called me by my name." Song Yi was silent for a moment. Such a simple sentence was enough to let him know that this girl was not favored in the other family. "Then, I'll call you Chin from now on. Only big brother can call you that," he suddenly said. "Sure." Gu Shengyin smiled. It felt so good to be cherished and loved by someone. "All right, my dear Princess Chin, where do you plan to go today?" Song Yi asked with a smile. Gu Shengyin tilted her head and seemed to think for a while. Then, she shook her head. "I don't know. I've never been to an amusement park before." When she said this, she was very calm, as if she was talking about something very trivial. Song Yi's heart ached for a moment. He controlled his emotions and said with a smile, "Then big brother will take you out to play today." He brought Gu Shengyin to the largest amusement park in the city. This place was a sacred place for couples to date, and it was also the favorite place for children. After he parked the car and walked out, he saw Gu Shengyin standing there waiting for him. She was holding 2 big cotton candies in her hands. He couldn't help but smile. This little sister of his looked mature and steady, but in fact, she was still a little girl on the inside. When Gu Shengyin saw him, she smiled and handed him one. Song Yi was surprised. "For me?" Chapter 682. Gu Shengyin nodded with a smile. "When I was young, I used to watch other kids holding cotton candy in their hands at the amusement park. I was always envious of them. But no one took me there and no one bought it for me. When I grew up, I gradually stopped thinking about it." She opened her mouth and took a bite. "It was so sweet. I just saw it and suddenly wanted to buy one to try." Song Yi looked at her and suddenly said, "Actually, I've never eaten cotton candy before." "Thank you, Chin." Gu Shengyin was surprised. "You've never eaten cotton candy before?" Song Yi nodded. He didn't tell her that it was because he was precocious and had no interest in these things that kids liked. That day, Song Yi, who had never been to an amusement park before, accompanied Chin, who had never been to an amusement park before. They played all the rides in the amusement park. When they got home, the sky was already dark. Song Yi received a phone call. He said, "Yeah, Chin and I are outside. We won't be home for dinner. Don't wait for us. We're still outside." "Okay." He hung up the phone. Gu Shengyin asked, "Was it Mom?" Song Yi nodded and turned around. "I just told her that we won't be home for dinner. Chin, you won't be mad, right?" Gu Shengyin shook her head. After what happened during the day, she wouldn't be happy to see Song Tian. It was better to be outside. "Let's go. I'll take you to a place." Gu Shengyin followed Song Yi. He parked the car outside a hotel. The waiter led them to the reserved seats. Gu Shengyin didn't know when he booked a private room. As soon as she opened the door, she covered her mouth in surprise. An exquisite and beautiful cake was quietly placed on the table. The bright red number, 16, was burning faintly. Song Yi led her to sit down. I messed up the birthday party during the day. I can only make it up to you. Time was tight, so I couldn't make it better. Song Yi explained to her. Next year, I'll definitely give Qin Qin a perfect birthday party, he said seriously. Gu Shengyin shook her head and looked at Song Yi with a smile. To me, this is already the most perfect birthday of my life. The birthday party during the day was not just her birthday. She saw clearly that the huge cake had Song Tian's name on it. Now, there was only Qin Yu in the small private room. Her brother, Song Yi, had spent a lot of effort to prepare a birthday celebration for her. She closed her eyes and began to make her wish. Song Yi looked at Gu Shengyin under the candlelight. Her long and curly eyelashes cast a small shadow on her smooth cheeks. Her rosy lips were curved, showing that she was in a good mood. From the first time he saw her, he felt that this girl was beautiful. Now that he knew that she was his sister, he felt that Gu Shengyin was perfect in every way. Gu Shengyin opened her eyes and met Song Yi's focused gaze. His face softened under the candlelight. His pitch-black eyes were filled with gentleness as he looked at her. She couldn't help blushing. It was already very late when the siblings got home. Song Tian had already returned to her room to rest because of her leg injury. Papa Song and Mama Song were waiting for them in the living room. When they saw Gu Shengyin coming back, they both looked apologetic. Chapter 683. They didn't say much. They only asked them if they had a good time today and told them to go and rest. Mr. and Mrs. Song could tell that in their eldest son's heart, this sister who had just returned was much more important than Song Tian. Even when he took Yu Yu out to play today, he was indirectly telling them that he was very dissatisfied with Song Tian. Gu Shengyin went back to her room to take a shower. She came out with her wet hair. Before she could dry her hair, she heard a knock on the door. Mrs. Song opened the door and came in with a plate of milk and fruit. Why is your hair still wet? Mrs. Song saw that Gu Shengyin's hair was still dripping with water, so she complained intimately. Gu Shengyin explained instinctively, I just came out of the shower. I didn't have time to dry it yet. She pointed at the hairdryer she had just found. Mrs. Song walked over to take the hairdryer and asked her to sit down. Let me do it. Gu Shengyin sat down obediently. She could feel a hand gently holding her hair and fondling it. She probably knew why Mrs. Song was here. They both knew what happened today. The one who had been wronged was Gu Shengyin. Mrs. Song and her daughter didn't think about it for now. They enjoyed this rare moment of warmth. After her hair was dry, Mrs. Song put down the things in her hands and sat down beside Gu Shengyin. Yu, I know. Tian was unreasonable today. You've been wronged, Mrs. Song said. Gu Shengyin lowered her head and didn't say anything. She didn't know how to reply. It was impossible to say that she wasn't angry or wronged. Song Tian disliked her for disturbing her life. She didn't even blame her for taking away the life that should have been hers. However, she couldn't say those words in front of Mrs. Song. And Qin Yu wasn't Song Tian. Unlike her, and Qin Yu didn't grow up in such a carefree family. And Qin Yu couldn't complain so impulsively and directly. How could Mama Song not know that her daughter wasn't feeling good? She sighed and reached out to hug Gu Shengyin. I have already discussed it with your father. When Tiantian's leg is healed, we will send her back to her own home. The An family must miss their daughter very much. Gu Shengyin lay quietly and obediently in her arms. After a long time, she finally gave a soft hum. The Song parents seemed to have told Song Tian the news. Gu Shengyin didn't see Song Tian with her own eyes, but she heard that she threw a huge tantrum and cried, saying that she didn't want to leave the Song family. However, Father and Mother Song were determined this time. Although they couldn't bear to part with their daughters, they knew that with both of their daughters in the Song family, there were some conflicts that couldn't be resolved. Both were flesh and blood, but if Father and Mother Song had to choose, their biological daughter, who had grown up outside and had never experienced the slightest bit of familial warmth, would undoubtedly make them more reluctant to let go. Moreover, the DNA test was already out. They had no reason to let Song Tian continue to stay in the Song family. The Song family had already discussed it with the Yin family. They could visit Song Tian while she was recuperating. They could familiarize themselves with each other. They wouldn't be strangers when Song Tian returned to the Yin family. As for what happened back then, seeing the Yin family's attitude, Mrs. Song and Mr. Song knew that there was something fishy going on. However, they didn't intend to pursue it for Song Tian's sake. This could be considered their last bit of appreciation for Song Tian. Chapter 684. When Gu Shengyin returned to the Song family, it was almost the end of the semester, so the long winter vacation came soon. In the past holidays, Qin Yu was very busy. She didn't want to stay at home, so she went out to do some part-time jobs to earn pocket money. This time, she had truly enjoyed a holiday that belonged to her. Song Yi was also at home. He had been studying abroad before. This time, he came back home after graduation and went directly to the Song enterprise to accumulate experience. On this day, Gu Shengyin had just finished breakfast when someone came to visit her. Qin Yu. Mrs. An saw Gu Shengyin at first glance, but she didn't dare to recognize her. Was the girl in front of her really the daughter they had raised for more than 10 years? She still looked the same, but there was a big difference when she looked at her carefully. Mrs. An couldn't tell the specific difference. She just felt that she looked like a rich young lady in a TV show. Gu Shengyin kept the smile on her face. "My name is Song Qin Yu now." As early as the second day after she returned to the Song family, her father transferred her household registration and other information to the Song family. As for the name, he didn't change it after consulting with Gu Shengyin. Mrs. An's face was a little gloomy. She had been looking at the Song family since she came in. Such a luxurious and beautiful villa, and there were even servants and nannies in the house. Her Tian Tian, the name she got from the Song family. She had lived in such a place since childhood, and she was a real rich young lady. But now, her identity as Tian Tian was exposed. The Song family was going to take their biological daughter back. Her daughter was going to go back to her own home. Mrs. An couldn't tell whether she was happy or unhappy at this moment. She was happy because she was going to see her biological daughter who had been separated from her for many years. She was unhappy because she did such a thing in the past, thinking that her daughter could live a good life. But now the truth was found out. Gu Shengyin didn't want to talk more with them. She nodded and went upstairs to her room. Mrs. An and Mrs. An went to Song Tian's room under the guidance of the Song family's nanny. Song Tian was also informed that her biological parents would come to see her. Deep down, she resisted. In her heart, her father was like Father Song, a handsome, mature, and capable man. Her mother was like Mama Song, an elegant, beautiful, and well-maintained lady. She had never met Qin Yu's parents, but Song Tian knew that the Qin Yu's family wasn't well-to-do. They were just ordinary working-class people. How could they be good? During this period of time, Song Tian had been hating herself. Hating that she was not the flesh and blood of the Song family. Hating that Father Song and Mother Song were so cruel to send her away. Hating that the Yin family was not a wealthy family like the Song family. She hated Gu Shengyin the most. Without her, she would be the unique little princess of the Song family. Instead of being about to return to that ordinary family, everything would be back to square one. She sat on the bed in a daze as the door opened. "Tian Tian." A slightly agitated voice sounded. Song Tian raised her head and looked at the woman in front of her. She had obviously dressed up today, but Song Tian frowned. This woman was wearing new clothes, but they were obviously not branded. The texture was not good either. She had also put on some makeup, but it couldn't hide her old skin. The smell of cheap perfume wafted towards her, making her very uncomfortable. All of this made her feel disgusted. Chapter 685. She asked coldly, "Who are you? Why are you calling me by my name?" Mrs. N didn't expect her daughter to be so cold. She looked at Song Tian, who was sitting in the wheelchair with a cold expression. There was a sense of superiority in her eyes, which made her feel uneasy. Mrs. N tugged at the corner of her clothes. After a long time, she said, "Tian Tian, I'm your mother." She looked at her daughter, whom she hadn't seen for 16 years. Her eyes turned red. "Mother." Song Tian seemed to be provoked by this word. She sneered and said, "My mother is the top jewelry designer, Ms. Bai Baoyin. Who are you?" Mrs. N thought that her daughter didn't know about the mix-up between the two families. She explained anxiously, No, you're not the daughter of the Song family. I'm your mother. You and Nchinyu were swapped at the hospital." Song Tian hated it when people said that she wasn't the daughter of the Song family. She shouted, "Enough." She looked at the two people who were said to be her biological parents and said coldly, "Since we were swapped at that time, it means that Nchinyu and I are destined to be together. Since it's been wrong for so many years, why don't we just let it be? Why did you come back 16 years later?" Mrs. N looked at her in shock. She had thought a lot before she came. She thought that her daughter would be as nervous and excited as she was about to meet her biological parents. She thought that maybe she would feel strange and awkward. She never thought that her daughter would be so repulsed. She didn't even want to acknowledge her and her father. Her heart was a little cold. She looked at Song Tian with a sorrowful gaze and mumbled, "But now the Song family already knows who their real daughter is." Seeing her mention this again, Song Tian felt that this woman was doing it on purpose. She was purposely repeating this matter to tell her that she, Song Tian, was just a sparrow that had flown up to a branch. The 16 years of luxury she had lived was just something she had stolen. Now that the real phoenix was back, she would soon be beaten back to her original state. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She picked up the things beside her and threw them at them. "Go away! Go far away! Who's your daughter?" "I'm Song Tian. I'm the daughter of the Song family. He's not from the N family." Mother N looked at her daughter in disbelief. The disgust and strangeness in her eyes when she looked at her and her husband was so obvious. This child clearly used this kind of behavior to tell them she hated them. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and cry. Why did it turn out like this? She was her biological daughter. Back then, for her daughter to live a good life, she went against her conscience and did such a thing. But now, she was unwilling to acknowledge them. Mrs. Song, who was outside the door, left quietly. She had heard that the couple was here and was worried that Song Tian would feel awkward with them, so she came over to take a look. However, she did not expect to hear such a conversation. Even though she was unhappy, this couple was still her biological parents. How did Tian Tian become like this? In the room, Father N, who had been silent all this time, suddenly reached out and grabbed his wife. He looked at his daughter with a very strange gaze. "You Feng, let's go. She wants to be her eldest miss. We can't give her what she wants." As a man, he was not as emotional as his wife. Therefore, he could see things much more clearly than his wife. Chapter 686. Mr. and Mrs. N came with a heart full of expectations, but left with a heart full of disappointment. Before they left, they remembered to say goodbye to the host. Gu Shengyin and Mama Song stood together to receive them. Father N looked at the mother and daughter together. The two of them stood like this, afraid that no one would doubt the relationship between them. "Qin Yu." He paused for a moment before saying, "Dad, Uncle An and Auntie An have let you down all these years. Now that you're back at home, you must be happy." Gu Shengyin smiled politely and looked at her mother. "Don't worry. Dad, Mom, and brother are all very good to me." Mama Song didn't like Mr. An's tone. When Yu was in their house, he didn't care much about her. Now that she was back, he stood out to be a good person. She smiled faintly. Yu Yu is my daughter. Her father and I will treat her like a precious treasure. Mr. N, you don't have to worry about her. Mr. N opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He wanted to pull his wife away. But Mama N stood still. She looked at Mama Song and said, "What about Tian Tian? Tian Tian has lived in the Song family for so many years. She has long regarded this as her home. Don't you want her?" For the first time, Mama Song felt that she couldn't communicate with people. What was this? Now that everyone knew that Song Tian wasn't the daughter of the Song family, did Mama N not want her biological daughter back and wanted to keep her in the Song family? She smiled politely and said, "Now that we know that Tian Tian is your daughter, of course, we can't do anything to separate you. My husband and I have already discussed it. Tian Tian's leg is injured, so it's inconvenient for her to move. When her leg is healed, you can come and take her home." Thinking of her daughter's attitude, Mama N felt that she had to explain things for her daughter. She asked Mama Song sharply, "Are you so heartless? Tian Tian has been raised by you since she was a child. She has long regarded this as her home and you as her biological parents. Now that you've found your daughter, you don't care about family ties and abandon her?" Mama Song was speechless. Her good upbringing prevented her from swearing. She was so angry that she trembled. There was actually such a shameless person in this world. What kind of logic was this? Sending her back to her biological parents, this is called not caring about kinship and being heartless? Her hand suddenly felt warm. Gu Shengyin was holding her hand. Gu Shengyin looked coldly at Mother N, who seemed to be very indignant, and said, "Auntie N, you're wrong. I've been raised by you for 16 years, but I've never felt any familial warmth from you. When I wanted to go back to the Song family, I didn't see any reluctance on your face. As for Song Tian, you've only just found out about her existence, yet you're already thinking so wholeheartedly for her." It can be seen that the kinship of blood is not something that can be offset by the kindness of raising her. In my opinion, only when she returns to the N family can she enjoy your deepest kinship. Mrs. N was rendered speechless by Nchinyu's words. She had never liked Nchinyu. Now that Nchinyu had rebutted her, she subconsciously wanted to scold Nchinyu. Father N pulled her back. "That's enough, don't make a fool of yourself here." Even he couldn't bear to listen to what his wife had just said. Didn't he see that the expressions of the Song family's mother and daughter had changed? Chapter 687. Mother N still didn't want to give up, but Father N pulled her out of the door with an ashen face. Mother Song was so angry that she sat on the sofa alone, sulking. Gu Shengyin poured her a glass of water. "Mom, don't be angry." Mother Song held the glass, the warmth of her palm warming her heart. She looked at her obedient daughter in front of her and couldn't help but feel pity in her heart. Her Yu Yu grew up in such a family. "Yu Yu, Mom and Dad are sorry," she said softly. She was sorry because she didn't find out the truth all these years, and also because she and her husband owed their daughter for the decision they made today. Mother Ann's behavior today showed that she was very concerned about Song Tian's biological daughter. This made Mother Song know that her and her husband's guess was probably right. What happened back then wasn't necessarily a mistake by the hospital. Mother Ann's treatment of Yu Yu was very likely because she had always known that she wasn't the N family's daughter. She loved this daughter very much, but now she had to choose not to know the truth for the sake of another child she had raised since she was young. If they chose to sue, what would happen to Tian Tian in the future? They would send Song Tian back to the N family and treat Yu Yu even better in the future. By the end of the summer vacation, Song Tian's leg was almost healed. Father and Mother Song ignored her crying and pestering and sent her back to the N family. Father and Mother Song were indeed not used to losing a child they had watched grow up in the family, but there was also something that made them very happy. Their eldest son, Song Yi, had a very good relationship with Yu Yu. He and Song Tian had been siblings for 16 years, but in terms of closeness, he couldn't even compare to Yu Yu, who he had only known for 2 months. Even Father and Mother Song couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps this was really fate and fate. Gu Shengyin and Song Yi's relationship was indeed very good. During this summer vacation, Gu Shengyin thoroughly enjoyed the feeling of being spoiled by her brother. Song Yi had already taken her to all the fun places around the area. "Brother, you'll spoil me like this." She pouted and acted coquettishly when they returned home that day. This was a side that only appeared in front of Song Yi. Normally, Gu Shengyin was reserved and cold. Even in front of father and mother Song, she was more like an obedient and sensible beast. Only in front of Song Yi would she reveal her girlish side. This made Song Yi very happy. He felt that he was the most important person in his little sister's heart. He reached out his hand and gently patted Gu Shengyin on the top of her head. "So what if I spoil you? Big brother will take care of you for the rest of your life." He was 1.8 meters tall. Gu Shengyin, who was 1.6 meters tall, looked very petite when she stood in front of him. Hearing this, Gu Shengyin was silent for a moment. She said softly, "If Big Brother has a girl he likes in the future, the one he dotes on the most will not be me." Song Yi was stunned for a moment, but he quickly smiled and said, "That won't happen. I promise that the one I like the most will be Qin Qin." She didn't say that she wouldn't fall in love with someone else. Gu Shengyin felt unhappy. She expressed that she was a little emotional. She snorted and said, "It doesn't matter if Big Brother has a girl he likes in the future. In any case, there will be someone who will like me in the future. He will dote on me more than Big Brother." She had to admit that she was a petty person. She had said those words on purpose to anger him. As expected, when he heard this, Song Yi's face darkened. Chapter 688. The space in the car was very small, and Gu Shengyin could clearly feel the low pressure coming from Song Yi. She didn't seem to understand why this man was suddenly unhappy. "Brother, what's wrong?" The word brother woke Song Yi up. Yes, he was her brother. She would meet another man in the future, and that man would be responsible for holding her hand and accompanying her in the future. He wouldn't be in her future. When he thought of this possibility, Song Yi felt as if there was a fire burning in his heart, giving him the urge to destroy something. How could this be possible? Song Yi felt that something was wrong with him. He always thought that he only doted on Qin Qin as an older brother, but today, he was enlightened by her words. This kind of possessiveness was abnormally strong. It was far from being as simple as an older brother to his younger sister. He returned to his previous gentle self and smiled at Gu Shengyin. "It's nothing. Qin Qin, don't say such things in the future." Seeing that he recovered so quickly, Gu Shengyin snorted softly and didn't say anything. Song Yi had calmed down on the surface, but his heart was still in turmoil. He needed some time to figure out what kind of feelings he had for his younger sister. He used to complain and feel conflicted, but now he was incomparably glad that he had come to this family. Soon, it was time for school to reopen. Gu Shengyin was in her second year of high school. They hadn't seen each other for only one holiday, but her classmates were surprised to find that the straight-A student in Qinyu was completely different from before. No, and Qinyu. Her name on her homework book had changed to Song Qinyu. She wore branded clothes that made them envious. She even had a personal chauffeur to drive her to and from school every day. Some people even saw many times that the person who picked her up was a very handsome man. That man didn't look like a student, so some scheming people secretly guessed that she might have been taken advantage of by a rich man because of her beauty. Until someone recognized that the very young and handsome man was Song Tian's older brother, who was very rich in school. Song Tian used to be very high profile in school, so there were many people who paid attention to her. Soon, a piece of news spread in the school. It turned out that in Qinyu, the straight-A student wasn't slept with by a rich man. She was the real rich man's daughter. When they were born, the hospital mistook them for each other. Song Tian was raised by the Song family as their daughter for more than 10 years, while in Qinyu, the heiress of the Song family lived an ordinary life for more than 10 years. What a melodramatic plot. The students who heard the truth all expressed, "I thought that this kind of plot could only be seen in TV dramas for rich families. I didn't expect it to actually happen in real life. Sure enough, art came from life. This was the truth. Now the truth was out. And Chinyu had become Song Chinyu. She had returned to the Song family and lived the life of a rich heiress. Many people were enlightened. No wonder, and Chinyu usually didn't like to talk. Even if she was just sitting there calmly, she still had an aura that made people not dare to disturb her. This was her innate temperament. Since the real young mistress of the Song family had returned, then what about Song Tian? Everyone's attention was on Song Tian, the fake miss. Chapter 689. Song Tian had been very unhappy during this period. She was sent back to the Yin family. The Yin family's house was so small that her room was not even a third of the size when she was in the Song family. Although the Yin family's parents tried their best to treat their daughter better after more than 10 years, after all, the conditions were here. It was impossible to satisfy her like in the Song family. She liked a piece of clothing and wanted to buy it, but mother rejected her as soon as she saw the price. What a joke. She and her husband couldn't even afford such a piece of clothing with their combined monthly salary. If Song Tian could barely endure all this, then being in school was truly a form of torture for her. She didn't tell them that she had changed her name and still asked people to call her Song Tian. However, some things couldn't be hidden. For example, she took a taxi to school every day. She didn't want to take the bus. When some of her friends talked to her about some new brands, they asked her in surprise why she didn't buy them. In particular, there had been rumors recently that Chinyu was the real eldest daughter of the Song family. She had changed her name to Song Chinyu. The fact that Song Tian had been sent back to the Yin family was also revealed. Now, when she walked in the school, she felt that all kinds of eyes were looking at her. Those people must be secretly saying bad things about her behind her back. Those who used to be jealous of her must be laughing at her now. Song Tian felt that she was about to go crazy. When school was over, her psychological defense was pushed down. Song Tian was blocked by a few girls at the entrance of the school's corridor. This place was relatively remote, and people rarely came here. She was on duty today, and she was here to take out the trash. At this time, almost all the students had left, so naturally, no one would come here. What do you want? She raised her chin arrogantly and asked them. Song Tian knew these people, and they were all from good families. Not long ago, the leader of the group was ruthlessly mocked by her because she was wearing a counterfeit, and the two of them became enemies. Seeing her like this, the girl sneered disdainfully. Hey, Song Tian. Oh no. The girl paused and looked at her with a malicious smile. See, I accidentally called you by mistake. You should be in Tian. Do you really think you're the eldest daughter of the Song family? You're so arrogant. You're just lucky that you were brought to the Song family and became the eldest daughter of the Song family for more than 10 years. But now, your good luck has come to an end. The real young miss has returned home. You're just an imposter. Why are you still pretending to be virtuous? You. Song Tian looked at her and trembled with anger. This was the scar that she did not want to be exposed the most. As long as she didn't say it out loud, she could still pretend that no one knew. In the eyes of outsiders, she was still the high and mighty young Mississippi. What about me? Did I say something wrong? The girl stopped smiling. She's just an imposter from an ordinary family. You used to be so arrogant. Now, let's see what else you have to be arrogant. She seemed to be so angry that she raised her head and slapped Song Tian's face. I've already slapped him long ago. How did you mock me back then? You made me lose so much face in front of the whole class. I admit that I'm a coward. If you're the eldest daughter of the Song family, I admit that I can't afford to offend you. But Song Tian, you didn't think that you would end up like this, did you? The girl looked at Song Tian's clothes. You bought these big brands when you were in the Song family, right? You think you're worthy? Chapter 690. The Girls Left. Song Tian squatted in the corner. Her school uniform jacket had been taken off and thrown on the ground. There were a lot of footprints on it, but this was nothing. The dress she was wearing, which she had bought last month at the Paris Fashion Week, had been maliciously cut into pieces and hung on her body. Her scalp was still hurting. Just now, those girls weren't polite to her. They directly pulled her hair and dragged her to the ground. A low sobbing sound came from the corner. After a long time, Song Tian expressionlessly picked up the unbelievably dirty school uniform from the ground. She patted the dust off it and wrapped herself up. Tian, what's wrong with you? Mother-in looked at her daughter, who had just entered the door, and seemed a little strange. She asked in surprise. Song Tian ignored her with a cold face. She went straight around her and went back to the room. The door was closed with a bang. Mother-in was shocked and immediately smiled bitterly. This daughter, since the day she came back, was very silent. She always stayed in the room silently by herself. She wasn't close to her husband and wife. Song Tian hid in the quilt and cried. It was all their family's fault. Just like that girl said, if she was still the eldest daughter of the Song family, she wouldn't dare to provoke her. At the end of the day, this society depended on one's status. When Mother-in called her for dinner at night, Song Tian ignored her. She was very annoyed with this family now, and also annoyed with herself. Song Tian became more and more silent day by day. In contrast, Gu Shengyin was very comfortable. The Song family was very distressed for this daughter. They wished they could pick the stars from the sky just to make her happy. What made Gu Shengyin strange was that Song Yi seemed to be very busy for a few days after he sent her home that night. The two didn't see each other for a few days. When they met again, Gu Shengyin felt that this brother seemed to have changed somewhere. However, Gu Shengyin didn't take it to heart when she saw that he was still extremely indulgent towards her. In the school, there were more and more people who approached Gu Shengyin intentionally or unintentionally. Although this school was a high school, many students already knew some of the ways of the world. After knowing how big the Song family was, no matter how cold Gu Shengyin was, there would be people who kept approaching. However, Qinyu had a cold reputation, and Gu Shengyin only needed to act like that to get rid of most people. Our school's top student, Song Qinyu, got first place again. Song Qinyu. I feel like she's really getting more and more beautiful. Song Tian felt as though she was surrounded by Song Qinyu. Song Qinyu's name was like a curse that haunted her. She became more and more silent, and her close friends no longer hung out with her. After school that day, Song Tian was stopped by someone. This boy's name was Su Jun. Su Jun's family was very rich, and he had always liked Song Tian. He was also the only person in their small circle who still treated Song Tian well after it was revealed that she wasn't the eldest daughter of the Song family. What's the matter? Song Tian frowned. She didn't want to have too much contact with these people, because every time she interacted with them, she realized once again that they were people from two different worlds. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.